unmute, but use that chat box to ask questions, and we'll get to that section when you can do that. So I want to welcome everyone today to the Victory 2020 Garden Q&A and update. My name is Erin Harlow. I'm the horticulture agent here in Columbia County. And then we've also got Maxine Hunter on. She's from Marion County, and she is the horticulture agent down there. So we are two of the many faces behind the Victory 2020 Garden community, if you will. So the purpose of today, we wanted to get you guys together and just give you a quick update on how the community is going, and then also give an opportunity for everyone to ask questions. So we've had a lot of questions that come up, and some of them I've pulled from our Facebook group that came in last night. And then if you have additional ones as well, again, put those in the chat box for us. Okay. So first I want to take a moment, I want to thank everybody that's part of this Victory 2020 Garden community. We have had an overwhelming response to this program that we've got going, and you'll see the numbers in a minute. It's been so much fun to watch everybody garden. I mean, I think that's been my favorite thing so far. We've got people all over the country, and whether they're, you know, a foot underneath snow right now, or they're in South Florida gardening, it's been a lot of fun to watch everyone start their gardens. So I just wanted to give you a quick update on where we stand right now. So these numbers were as of yesterday, okay? So since we started the program, it started mid-March or so, towards the end of March, we do have 693 households that have signed up to be a part of our community. So that's a very large number. You know, we were going for 40 or 50. So we're very excited to have so many people interested in gardening with us. We represent 42 different states around the country. And then we also have people from outside of the United States that have signed up to participate. So we have several in Canada, actually, one in Japan at the military base, and then also Germany. So like I said, all over the world, really, at this point. So that's been a lot of fun interacting with, again, people who may not be gardening in North Florida with the rest of us. So just to remind everybody, some of the learning opportunities with this group, you can join the Facebook group. It's a private group. It's called Victory Gardeners. We have around 400 or 500 members now in that group, and I try and check it several times a day. Maxine checks it as well. You may see, and we're interacting with you as our extension offices. So you'll see me posting as the Columbia County Extension Office. Maxine is posting as the Marion County Master Gardeners, and you might even see the Marion County 4-H program posting as well. They are a part of this group also. So you will see us posting in several different fashions. And like I said, we're interacting with you there. There's also these Zoom classes that we're doing that you're on now. We of course did the garden design class. We've done the tomato time. Next week, we're very excited to have Dr. Danielle Treadwell doing the introduction to organic gardening. So that should be a lot of fun, and we're very excited to have her on with us. We also are going to do garden pests after that. So that's really identifying the pest and what you might find in your garden. So some of those pest problems. You have seen, or if you haven't gotten them already, you should be getting them very, very soon. You should be seeing some seeds in the mail. And so that everybody has 3 packets. And Maxine, you can correct me if I'm wrong. They are corn, cowpeas, squash, and cucumbers. So it's a combination of 3 of those is what it is. And so it just depends on how much we have and where they're going and where we feel like they do the best. We'll talk more about the seeds in a bit. But plant those. Everybody that signed up through the Qualtrics link should receive seeds. We also have the book club that we are participating with at our state Master Gardener office. And this summer we're reading The Foodscape Revolution by Brie Arthurs. We're very excited to partner with them on this. And then we do have a youth book club, and we're going to start with Tops and Bottoms. It's a it's a fun little book if you've never read it, about a bear and a rabbit. And it's appropriate for the younger age audience, and then we'll have some activities. I think we'll start that probably next week or the week after for our little ones. And that's not going to go very long. It's a pretty short book, but they can walk themselves through the activities. So, you know, if parents want to do it over several days, they can. Or if they want to sit down and do it all in one day, that's up to them. We also have a youth record book that is available, and it really is a very, very comprehensive book. It's very similar to Garden Journal. And if you have 4-H youth that are participating in their garden this year, I would recommend requesting one of those, and you would request that with the Marion County 4-H office, and that we'll be sending those out. Actually, we're going to start printing them Thursday, and we're going to mail them to you. So this is a really good thing for probably ages 8 and up, because they are asked to do a lot of writing and observation and reflection in their gardens. But it is an excellent book that they've put together. So I do recommend that. And then you have access to the online course. You should receive an email. And Maxine, help me out. How often are they being added to that? How often are we uploading people?
So Erin, I've been doing it once a week, and actually we'll probably try to get the last week's stuff going today because we've had so many additions, but I've been adding people every Friday. Okay.
Perfect, thank you. I know we've gotten some questions over the weekend of how do they get on. So that online course, you should receive an email, and that email comes from the InStructure Canvas. Is that correct? Is an automated email? Okay, she says yes. So it's an automated email. So some people I know it went to their spam folders. So you may want to check your spam folders. You should be able to, it'll redirect you and you should be able to log in and change your password. That should be one of the first steps you do. And then you have access to the modules. Right now we've planned around 8 modules and they're posting those weekly. So they're updating them every week. A new one is posted. So they did the history the first week. They just posted the second week, which is really focusing on soils and what your plants need to grow. And then next week we'll be doing design. So check back constantly because it is something that is updated with new activities. And the nice thing is it's activities for both adults and youth. And the youth is broken up by age group. So if you have a young youngster, there's some activities for them. If you have an older youth, there's activities for them as well. And then of course the adults also. That's also where we're going to house our recorded online Zoom classes. So once they're on YouTube, we'll put that link in there and you can go back and check on those. Okay, so if there's no questions on the updates, I'm going to go ahead and start with the Q&As. And so like I said, these came from individuals that really just contacted me within the last probably 12 hours or so. So I've been getting so many questions, and if you are in the Facebook group, it's constant questions, and they're fantastic questions. You know, everything from how do I get started? I've never done this before, all the way up to what is this insect? So we're getting a lot of interaction and a lot of help from everyone. So that's been wonderful. So one of the first questions I got yesterday was, I'm in zone 9A. When do I start planting seeds for summer and fall? So really timing, figuring out how do I time my garden. And is this something important that you do have to kind of plan for? And I will tell you, that's one of my goals every year is to plan out my garden because I always get to the, oh, I want to plant. And then I realize I forgot to plant seeds like 6 weeks before that because I like plants. And so, or I didn't order them. That's usually my problem is, oh, I want to order this and they're not going to arrive for several more weeks. So I do need to plan ahead. So let's talk first about what's your zone, because there are some people in this group that aren't in 9A, which is typically that's going to be your Central Florida area here. We're in 8B, 9A, where I am in Columbia County. Maxine, you're probably in 9A as well. She says yes, okay. But like I said, we have gardeners all over the country. So how do we figure this out, okay? So we do have our plant hardiness zone, and you can actually go to this link on the bottom and you can enter in your zip code, and then it will tell you what zone you're in. Okay, so, or you can Google plant hardiness zone map, and it's by the USDA. So you can go up here and again, click in your zip code and you can find it. But it kind of gives you an idea of which plants, or when am I planting, or when should I be planting, okay? So that hardiness zone, again, tells you kind of when you look at seeds, it'll say, oh, this plant grows in zones 9 through 11 very well. Great, you know that you can grow it in Florida, and I know that I probably will be planting it maybe March, okay, based on like my zone. One other thing though is how do I know when to plant? I know my zone, but I need to know when my frost date is. And so it depends on where you are in the state. So we typically look at the frost date and then back it up by 6 weeks if you are going to plant seeds and do transplants. Okay, so if this doesn't make sense, let me know. But if you want to have baby plants, you know, that first week that you're able to plant, you have to think 6 weeks beforehand and plan for it. But going back to the question, how do I know when that is? Okay, I know I'm in 9A, so I know which plants I might want to grow, but I don't know when I need to start them. So how do I find that date? You can either do a couple different things. You can call your extension agent at the extension office and say, hey, what's our frost dates? Okay, so I know for my area, we typically say around March 20th is our last frost date. And then we look at around October for our first frost date. And let's see if I can get this to work. It may or may not work. This is gonna take us to NOAA. There we go. And so NOAA is one of our weather, it is our weather data, okay? So I'm gonna pick Florida, and you can actually look up your area. So this is the freeze and frost occurrence data. And so if you know kind of what weather station is near you, you can figure out that date. So for instance, if you're in Bushnell area, which is Sumter County, okay? Here you can see the spring dates and the fall dates at the top, and it has probability 90, 50, 10, and then it goes 10, 50, 90. So what that means is if I'm in Bushnell, there is a 90% chance that on February 12th, there's gonna be frost. Okay, so I probably don't want to plant my garden February 12th. So I want to look at, for the springtime, I want the least probability. So I prefer March 29th. Okay, see that? It's only got a 10% probability that I'm going to have frost. So I'm going to look, you know, March 7th through March 29th. If the closer you get to March 7th, the higher the probability. But if I aim for like March 20th, somewhere in there to March 29th, that's probably a pretty good, okay, I'm okay, I'm not gonna get a frost, I can start planting. And so if I've already done transplants, and I wanna know, I wanna plant on March 29th, I have to back up 6 weeks to start planting. So you're planting in February. So if I'm gonna go in the fall, she'd asked about fall as well, okay? In Bushnell, November 3rd, the 29th, and December 24th. I wanna plant around November 3rd. That's kind of the last date. So if I know I'm gonna aim for November, that's a 10% frost, I'm gonna plant my seeds to transplant them 6 weeks before that. So end of September, okay? So I'll probably put my garden in the end of October. Middle October, somewhere in there. Does that make sense? I know we've got a question on that. It says, for those of us starting seeds after the frost date in our area, like now, is there any hope? So that's a good question. What you're really looking for now is, it depends on the cultivar, okay? Maxine, you can chime in here if you'd like as well, especially for tomatoes. But at this point, we're looking at more direct sow. So if you're really into your, past your, you might not be doing transplants, is what I'm trying to say. You may look at things like, again, direct sow, the cowpeas that we sent people, the corn, that's all direct sow, meaning you're gonna put it directly in the ground. You're not gonna put it in a transplant pot and grow it up, over time. Okay. You have to consider things like tomatoes. If I don't have a cultivar or tomato that's heat resistant, if I'm not going to get, if it's going to get fruit, and it'll tell you on your seed package, it might take 75 days to harvest. Well, if I count out 75 days from now and it's going to be 103 degrees, I probably am not going to get fruit, and I may not want to choose that cultivar.
That's a great point, Erin. So on top of getting heat resistant varieties, getting the shorter harvest varieties is also really important. Yeah. So I'm a big fan of that because that also gives less opportunities for disease and pest problems to start, especially when you're starting later in the season.
Okay, so you guys can't see my, you can only see the PowerPoints, she's saying. Okay, hold on. Can you see that, the data? Okay, yes, they can see the data, perfect. Okay. All right. Let's go back then. So now you can see here's Bushnell, okay? That's what I was talking about with the dates. Here's your 90, 50, 10, okay? Can you guys see that? And so I got that from that link, that NOAA link on there. So you can go in and find your state and then find the location that's closest to you. So again, you can kind of judge where you are. So if I'm looking at Bushnell, it's about the 10th one down. Their probability at March 29th is 10%. So that's when I would say, okay, I'm probably going to plan around, March 20th. I'm okay with a 20% probability that I might get a freeze. But I'm not going to plant probably March 1st. That's a little bit too soon. But then that kind of helps me decide if I'm going to transplant. Again, going back to Maxine's point on the direct sow seeds, you can certainly try stuff too. I'm always a big fan of, you can try it, just know that you may not get quite as good of yield or harvest as you want. The other thing to consider too, like squash, for instance, my squash are fairly large. They're producing fruit at this point here in my zone. And the reason I try to get them in earlier is because if I wait too long, I know that I will get stem borers and other diseases and insects and things. And so it's just so much harder to get the fruit that I want when I want it. So I try, and especially this year, I tried to start stuff earlier so that I would have it. Okay. Why do you get a lower yield from direct sow? No, so it's not necessarily a lower yield. It depends again on the plant. So just because it's a direct sow, you can have great yields. So say things like beans. Beans I'm gonna direct sow. I wouldn't do a transplant typically with a bean. And so it's just timing. It's all about timing. So if I time it poorly and I wait too long and I direct sow, I'm just asking for more diseases and insects. Whereas if I timed it now, which is a good time, then you'll have enough time where you can actually get a harvest before being attacked by everything. Okay. All right, let me see if I'm going to share the screen again. Perfect. Okay, everybody should be back on the slides. All right, and there again, there's that link. So when this is active, you can get on there and look up your frost dates, or feel free to call your extension office. Remember, there's extension offices all over the country. It doesn't really matter where you are. You have an extension agent who knows that answer somewhere near you. Okay. So here's another question we got. If you find armyworms on one type of garden plant, meaning the potatoes, for instance, should you treat the entire garden plant, should you treat the entire garden or plants adjacent? Okay, so they want to do just do that section or the entire garden. So let's first, what are we looking for? Okay, this is my house, keep in mind. So these are my potatoes right now. And these little guys, we found those probably 3 days ago. So that's an armyworm, right? And there are several caterpillars out right now. And in this area, the armyworms just hatched last week or are hatching now. So we're finding them anywhere from 1/4 of an inch all the way up to an inch in size, but they will get bigger quickly. And then this is the damage. This is pretty significant damage. We call this window feeding, where they've scraped that those cells off, and then you can see they've gotten larger and have eaten the whole plant there. So the question is do we plant just, or do we treat just that area or the whole garden? Depending on how big the garden is would be one thing, but I'm a pretty firm believer in treating that area and not the whole garden, unless there's a problem in the whole garden. Most of our products for gardens are contact insecticides, meaning the plant's not going to take them up. The insect has to come into contact with that product, because you wouldn't necessarily want to use a systemic product in a garden that we're going to be consuming the food. So most of our products are considered contact, and that means that the insect has to come into contact with that product in order for it to work. Okay. So some options for your armyworms are your spinosad products, and that's an active ingredient. Okay, so it's not, when you go to the store, you'll have to look on the label and it'll say if it's a spinosad in little tiny print. But that is a very, considered a softer chemical. BT, or Bacillus thuringiensis, would be another option. This is dipel, which is a dust, or thuricide, which is a liquid. And I know we had a conversation on Facebook the other day about it, and I double checked with our vegetable specialist on this, because I've been told to be very careful with butterfly plants. So if you have, especially if they're in the garden with your other plants, I mix mine. I would be very careful to use this product because it works on any kind of caterpillar. So it doesn't discriminate if it's a what you would consider a pest or not, okay? Now, if your butterfly garden is nowhere near your vegetable garden, then you should be able to use it with no problem. But if that caterpillar happened to be wandering in your garden, then just know that you're going to be, dispatching all of the caterpillars in the garden if they come into contact with that product. And it could technically drift if you weren't careful. Okay, and drifting meaning moves by wind. But very good product. A lot of times we'll use it for corn as well. But I wouldn't do the whole garden unless you're seeing caterpillars all over the place. I will tell you that the tomato hornworms are also emerging right now, and they are about an inch in size currently. I did not put a picture up here of them, but they're the green ones with a little horn on the back. They are out in force. Typically, you'll find those on your tomatoes first. Armyworms tend to start on, they're starting on potatoes because that's what everybody has right now, but they'll move to anything, okay? You can also use your fingers, okay? I've trained my children. That is their chore now, is to go and scout for armyworms and then squish them. And that seems to be working quite well for us. Plus it gives them something to do right now because they're really, really bored. So that is their chore. And then some people ask about carbaryl, which is 7 dust. I only put it on here because people ask about it. I don't typically recommend it anymore. It is what I would consider a harsher chemical. I would definitely use one of these 3 first, but you will find people still use 7 dust quite a bit, but it is pretty non-discriminatory in your garden. So whatever's out there, you could certainly harm. We have a question, what about neem? You could certainly use neem oil as well. Just be careful with the heat and the time that you're using that. Maxine, any others that you've got on there that you want to add? She says no. Okay.
No, I love soap and water, just general old, Joy dishwashing liquid and a little bowl of water, and I'll swish the end of whatever pest, if I've got aphids or mealybugs, pick them off. And soap and water has been my best friend for many years.
Yeah, and that's one I didn't put on here, is soap and water. And then if it's something like, I know we're talking about armyworms, but I cannot squish insects. I will be perfectly honest. Like the little lubber grasshoppers, I can't do it. Even armyworms I struggle with. So I use like a little bit of rubbing alcohol in a bowl, and I'll just pop them in there. Yeah, I just put them in there and you know, then that takes care of that. But I can't squish. So, and then the question is where, again, unless I'm seeing pests all over the garden, I'm not going to treat everything. You know, I want to kind of keep it to an area. Again, there may be beneficials around that I do want to keep. And we're constantly scouting. So my suggestion would be is constantly walk through your garden. You know, we do a daily walkthrough and just look for caterpillars. And I'm looking for the damage typically. I'm not turning over every single leaf. But I'm doing that walkthrough and I'm looking, okay, I know where the armyworms hatched because I found them when they were little, but I didn't get everybody. So now I can see where they've kind of spread out. So we're checking again daily to kind of see who's there and who's you know, about. And keep in mind too that every product's not going to work for every insect. And I think that's why people like stuff like Carbaryl, because it does kill everything. But your Bacillus thuringiensis, again, is only caterpillars. So I might have some beetles, some flea beetles or something like that have come through and started to munch on stuff, or grasshoppers. That is not going to affect them at all. So in that instance, I would pick a different method. And this is where we're talking about integrated pest management. We're choosing something else. Okay. Some of your spinoscids will actually affect most of those. And of course, soap and water or that rubbing alcohol. Okay. Next question. Is there a good website to ID garden pests? I don't have one, is the short answer. Do you have one, Maxine? Do you know of one?
No, but people use our Facebook page all the time for insect and plant ID. Mm-hmm. So we're happy to have you submit things on Facebook and we'll be happy to answer them for you. And not only do you have myself checking that daily, but we also have our Florida Friendly Landscaping agent, Amanda Merrick, as well as a full team of master gardeners to check Messenger as well as other comments that might be in there.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I would agree. That's kind of how we, you know, I get a lot of emails. What is this? Photos. I don't know of any websites though for garden insects. Now, Virginia Tech didn't have a bad one. Of course, UF has similar where we've got all of our publications. And then this is from University of Florida down here in the corner. That's our tomato and pepper insect deck. So that's very handy for people who are just starting out, because most people do grow tomatoes. So for instance, you can see that tomato hornworm at the top there. And so that's a really good little handy guide that you can take in the garden with you and stand there and go, okay, yes, that is what I have. And maybe I should do something about him or leave him, you know. But otherwise, I don't know of an ID website. Okay. Another question. I read that working in the garden when it's wet or after rain can spread disease. This is true. Okay. So yeah, just be careful, especially right now. If you're in North Florida, you're getting a lot of rain right now. I try and limit when I walk through the garden and it's wet or early in the morning. I don't go around typically pinching off any of the tomato leaves or anything like that at that time. I usually wait till they're drier because again, you can spread and it's all in the sap of the plant. If you've got a diseased plant, you pinch it, you go to another one, you pinch it, you can spread that disease. Maxine, do you have any comments on that one?
No, I agree. I mean, it's very easy to spread disease, much easier than we would like.
Yeah. You know, and it says after rain, but I can also tell you, you know, think about your irrigation system. So at my house, for instance, my garden is so large and it's not designed in rows. It's more of a foodscape walking garden, if you will. So we've had to use impact sprays, which are overhead irrigation sprays. So I know that my foliage is going to stay wet when I irrigate. And so when I plan what I'm going to do, I don't typically try and go out there and work in the garden after I've irrigated, or I let it dry off. And I try and keep an eye on it, but I probably will have problems. Anytime you have splashing water like that, that's when those diseases, the fungal spores and the bacteria can jump or splash really from one plant to a next. So I know in my garden, I'm going to have a higher risk of disease spread just because of the irrigation that I'm using. So, okay. Another question. My yellow squash get to 1 to 2 inches long and fall off the plant. What's wrong? This is my house. so I was walking through my squash, doing my scouting, and oh, look, all my baby squash fell off. Okay. Very disappointing, especially if you're a new gardener. You know, and could you imagine you're so excited you have new little squash on your plants and then they start falling off and you want to know why. Okay. So it's really a pollination issue. Okay. So it starts when they're young plants. And if you look at the flowers of your squash, if you do have yellow squash, some of you got those seeds, but the flower that the person is holding, they've taken off the petals here, but that is the male flower. And then you can see on the right-hand side, that's the female flower because it has the fruit behind the pistil there, okay? So that would be the ovary of the plant. So if it's not pollinated correctly, say I don't have enough bees or you know, whatever the pollinator source is, it's not going to continue to mature into fruit. So at that point, the flower would die and the little baby fruit would fall off. So if you don't, or if you are encountering this problem, like I am, okay, you may want to consider hand pollination of your squash. And we have a really good publication. I've listed it here, so you can click on it afterwards, and we'll include it with the resources as well. But you may want to consider hand pollinating, which is not very difficult, but it may be something that you do consider doing to increase the yield. Luckily, my neighbors are putting in bees, so I'm hoping that helps my situation. But just know that's typically why those little squash fall off. Okay, no questions on that one? Okay. Are there any special instructions for the seeds I received? Yes, is the short answer. Okay, I'm gonna give you a couple of tips, basically. So I think we're still mailing out seeds as they kind of in batches. So I don't know where we're at, but they're trying to get to everybody pretty quickly. So if you haven't received them, you should be. But I just want to give you again some of the questions that have come up for these seeds. If you receive the cowpeas, they are Elite Cream is the cultivar. They are a bush type, so you don't need to trellis them. Okay, that was a question we had yesterday. You can eat them either small or they get about 7 inches long, the pods do. So what most people will do is dry them on the plant. So you actually let the pod dry on the plant, then you harvest it. Okay, so it would be a dry bean. And you can make soups out of them, you can cook them down, something like that, but you're gonna have to shell them, okay? Some people use peas or beans as a nitrogen fixer, okay? If you're going to do that, realize your soil has to have the amount of bacteria it needs or the inoculant it needs to actually help fix that nitrogen so that it's available to plants. So sometimes you may, if you're a new gardener or you haven't been working that soil for very long, you may want to consider adding an inoculant with your cowpeas. And that's really if you're going to use them as a nitrogen fixer, okay? All right, your corn is Tucker's yellow, favorite yellow. That is a field corn, okay? There's two different types of corn. There's field corn, there's sweet corn. If you are already planting corn and then you received our seeds, so say you're already planting sweet corn, don't put them next to each other because you can mess up the corn for both. And so this is probably the trickiest one. I want you to look at your corn that you already have growing. If it's a sweet corn, make sure you're planting these farther than 25 feet apart and that the harvest dates are going to be about 12 days apart or more. Okay? And the reason is because corn will cross-pollinate. And so you'll end up with not a sweet corn and not a field corn and kind of something yucky in between. So I do want you to consider that. So if you already have your other corn going and it's, you know, fairly tall and then you plant this one, you should be fine because they're not going to be tasseling at the same time. But if you planted them at the same time, or you've got a bag of sweet corn you're going to plant at the same time as the corn seeds we sent you, either plant them really far apart and it'll have to be farther than 25 feet, or hold on to one and plant a little bit later. Okay. If you have questions about that, let me know. There's not much on the squash early prolific. Follow the label on that one. That's pretty easy. And the cucumber market maker 76, that's a good standard cultivar. You can use a trellis. Okay, so I didn't have much else on that one. All right, so we had a question here. Zone 8A, raised bed question. Okay, anything you would not plant, issues in anything you would not plant or issues thriving in raised beds. And then the second question to that is, has planting season passed for any particular vegetables? Good questions. All right, so anything you would not plant or issues in raised beds. Maxine, what do you think?
Sorry, wrong button here. So things that I wouldn't plant in raised beds would include things that are going to take up a lot of space. So watermelon, anything that's going to be sprawling and take up more room than what you have available. Spacing is really important, and if you get things that are overly crowded, you're going to end up with insect and disease problems.
Yeah. Has any season passed for a particular vegetable? So again, this depends on where you are. You're in 8A. Potatoes is one of those that people are trying to put them in now. Mine are already starting to flower, so you're getting late on potatoes. Would be one of those for sure, especially in 8A. I would have done those, and we usually do those in like into January, beginning of February for that area. Trying to think if there's any others. Do you know of any others, Maxine? Yeah, that's the biggest one that keeps coming up again, is people are wanting to put potatoes in, but they're usually ready in May, so I wouldn't do those. Okay, question about corn. We have only a small patio. I've heard some people grow it in a 5-gallon bucket. Good idea, bad idea? I would say you probably could try it. I don't know that I'm not sure I would give you a good idea or bad idea. You're going to have to do, the thing with corn is you have to have enough of it to pollinate each other. So that's why we don't recommend planting it in rows. I didn't mention that, but we usually put our corn in like blocks and not in rows. So if you do a 5-gallon bucket, I mean, I don't see why you couldn't try it. I'm not going to guarantee you'd get great results because of this, the space. But I'm for trying anything. So, Maxine, do you have any thoughts on that one? Did you shake your head no?
No, I don't really have any further thoughts on that. Corn would not be my first pick to put in buckets. Buckets grow fantastic on small patio areas, but I've seen them work very successfully with eggplants, peppers, tomatoes. I've never seen corn done in them.
So my only concern would be they dry out really, really fast. And the corn really sucks up a lot of water. So that would be my only concern, is you're really going to have to watch it. You're probably going to have to water it daily when it gets tall, if not twice a day, and just make sure that you've got enough soil in there and enough roots, because there's a good chance it'll dry out. So you might want to find a friend and give them the seeds and then just go harvest. Would maybe be a better suggestion for that one. Oh, here we go. Okay. When pruning tomato plants so the leaves don't reach the soil, do you cut the entire branch or just enough to limit the leaves touching the ground? All right, so Maxine, you did a tomato class last week. Do you want to kind of elaborate on this one?
Sure. So for tomatoes, if it were me and the plant is mature enough, I would prune the entire branch off to get it off the ground. However, if it's a smaller plant, then I would just trim the specific leaves off that are hitting the ground. You really want to try to prevent as much splashing of soil onto the plant as you can. So just make sure you're not watering over the top of the plant, water the root zone only to help prevent that.
So what do you think about putting like a hay or something down for a mulch where it's not contacting the soil, but it's on that? How do you think
that might help some. I'm a big fan of mulches, so I don't see anything wrong with that at all. Just make sure whatever your source is, you're not adding additional weed seeds.
Yeah. All right. All right, so we are at 11:45. If there's more questions that we haven't answered or a topic you want us to talk about, please write that in the chat now. Okay, so somebody says compost bin DIY ideas. All right, so most people, if it's DIY, do something like a pallet composter. So that would certainly be an option. If some of them have a front on it where they'll put like the pallet and they just kind of put sticks where they kind of lift that gate up and off. So that's an option. I will tell you mine are just open bays that are built out of wood that my husband, and they're just 4x4s that he put on and some planks. And that seems to work pretty well for us. And I've got 2 or 3 bays where I can move stuff around. We've got one here at the office that is the rolling kind that I've seen them make out of the 55-gallon drums. So you can get a 55-gallon drum and do that as well, where the lid will screw off, and you actually will attach the pivot points on the side, and so you can actually flip the whole thing. They built a stand for it, and they just flip the whole thing. So that would be an option. That's like a smaller, you're not getting a huge amount from that, but you certainly could put compost in it. Maxine, do you have any other ideas for the DIY?
No, I'm a big fan of using concrete blocks and setting up some bins, or you can just use a variety of like the different buckets. It really depends on how much compost you're going to have. So, but I've used things like buckets from my horse stalls before, but like the big ones, the tubs, not like a small bucket. And I've used those to rotate. And I've also seen them done with pallets. So those are some options, but it's really important to make sure it has enough time.
So yeah, and her question was, and I saw this one on, one of the only questions I haven't responded to on Facebook because I don't know the answer. There are markings on the pallet that are critically important. One idea I saw had some markings that said to make sure they are on there. So basically if it's like a food safe kind of pallet, are they okay to use just weathered ones and not stress about the stamps on them? I've never heard that, but that was one question I'm actually been trying to find the answer for you because I don't know.
That is the first time I've heard that, and to my knowledge, I thought pallets were used with untreated wood.
Right.
So I don't have any information on that one. I had not heard that prior to.
Yeah, I had not either, and I think you posted some pictures on Facebook, I believe, with the markings. And so that is what I'm still looking for the answer for you because I'm not entirely sure. Yeah, I would say 99% of people don't stress about it. We've all just used regular pallets. So, but if I hear otherwise, I will let you know for sure. Okay, would you use clean filtered runoff from septic for garden? Ooh, good question. So here's the thing. That's kind of like using reclaimed water, okay? And probably not even to that standard because you're not professionally cleaning it. So the EPA has guidelines on this, okay? And it depends on the plant and crop. So I probably would not because I grow things like tomatoes where I'm eating the skin. Carrots, I peel it, but it depends on how good you peel it. Cucumbers, you're not peeling the skin. So if it's something that you're not peeling, you're not allowed to use reclaimed water even. So I would not use the septic runoff either. So if we've got somebody on the call that's in like an HOA type situation or an urban environment and they are in a neighborhood with reclaimed, they have to be very, very careful what vegetables they plant and where that water source comes from. And that's where I would start looking at things like maybe rain barrels or cistern where I'm capturing that water. If I wanted to be very smart about water reuse, then I would start looking at something like that and pumping it back to the garden, especially if I'm on something like reclaimed. Yeah. Okay. All right. Somebody said patio gardening. They're always happy to hear about patio gardening. Was there any specific question on patio gardening? I know we've gotten questions on like the soils, you know, where do I get, for especially our new gardeners, where do I get raised bed soil, that sort of thing. And really if you're doing small containers for patio gardening, you can pick up a bag of potting soil, will work fine. You can get raised bed soil if you want. Just don't pick up, make sure you guys don't pick up like germination mix or propagation mix. That's really, really fine. And that's for your transplants. So if you're starting seeds, I do recommend picking up that propagation, or it's called a germination mix. So it's a really light soil, but that would only be if you're starting seeds. Otherwise, if you're doing a small container, you know, pick up some potting soil, or like I said, there's raised bed mixes as well. Any other, oh, there we go. For people without a real yard, okay, for in-ground garden beds, is there another option besides hydroponics? Again, containers. You're really looking at containers, and you can successfully grow a lot in containers. The other thing you might want to consider if you want something a little bit more often is you might want to look into something like microgreens. And so you're able, so microgreens they're small, they're only a couple inches, and you use that propagation mix, it's real light, and you just put a whole bunch of seeds. So you might use radish that week. Well, within a week or two, you get enough where you can cut it off, and so it's called a microgreen. It's used on garnishes. You can cook with it. You can put it in salads, but you're still gardening and you're getting that nutritious, fresh produce. But you know, you're not maybe growing giant corn on your patio. But potatoes for you could do potatoes in trash cans. Those work great. You can use perlite I grow my potatoes in perlite. I do have to use a fertilizer mix for them, but I just have a trash can with perlite and put the potatoes in there, so it's cleaner. So that would be an option, and it's kind of like hydroponics. It's a soilless media. Maxine, I don't know if you have anything to add to that one. I mean, carrots do really well in the containers like that you can get it at the box stores. They just, you know, just get the shorter carrots, or get a box that's deep enough, and you can easily grow carrots, and they're actually a very pretty plant too. So, and there's some cultivars. One other thing, there's some cultivars that do better in small spaces. So like we grew an eggplant this year, the Master Gardeners did, called Patio Baby. It's a small plant. I mean, it's specific for patios. Maxine had talked about last week determinate tomatoes versus indeterminate tomatoes. Determinate meaning they get to a certain size and then stop growing. And that would be the preferred size probably for a patio. Whereas if you're an indeterminate tomato, it might start spilling over the balcony of your apartment or wherever you're at. So again, cultivar selection. And you know, you can always ask your extension agent for ideas. That's what we're here for. Yeah. Any other questions? We're right at 11:55. I am going to put up our information. So that's our email addresses if you want to get a hold of us. If you're on the Facebook page, you're certainly welcome to, if you're in the private Facebook page, you can post there. You can always post on our county pages as well. So Maxine mentioned her Master Gardener page. I'm on the Columbia County Extension Office page. We're both constantly checking those, and our email addresses as well. So, you know, feel free to reach out with any question that you might have. So. Are folks still working in the offices for soil testing this week in Ocala? Very good question, Maxine.
Yes, so we test bi-weekly in Ocala. We do not test every week. There are people in our office. It is not open to the public, but you are welcome to call ahead and we can set out a drop box for you to collect the sample. So you'll just set it in the drop box right outside the front door, and then we'll email your results after it's been processed. And I should be doing samples next Thursday. So they're run every other Thursday.
And they can still be mailed to UF as well. The UF lab is still taking samples, and those should be $10 a sample. The other question was, how do we access the previous Zoom classes? I missed the tomato class. So we are putting those on YouTube for you, and so we're actually in the process of doing that right now. And so they will be housed, one on YouTube, and then two, we're putting the links on the Canvas course. So you can go in there and access everything. And then I imagine I will be posting it on the Victory Gardeners Facebook page too, to remind everybody where they are. So we'll try and get those out to you. If you did sign up for that class, we will also be emailing everybody that signed up. And we're doing that for all the classes, by the way. Anything else? Okay, well, if there's nothing else, we want to thank you guys. It's right at 12 o'clock, so we're going to keep on time today. And let us know if there's anything else you need from us. And if not, we'll see you next week. Next week, we've got Introduction to Organic Gardening with Dr. Danielle Treadwell. I'm excited about it. I think it's always fun to hear from our UF faculty, so should be a good one. And with that, happy gardening, and let us know if you need anything else. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.